good, Internet? We're back with another episode of Nothing But Netflix. With us today is Adam Taylor, who is the lead writer at CelticsBlog.com. He is a podcast host for Celtics Blog. Has a new podcast called The Hoop Spy with Jonathan Macri, who was our first guest. Did the movie Eddie with Jonathan. And today we're going to break down the movie Celtic Pride, which is one of my all-time favorite basketball movies, starring Dan Akroyd and Daniel Stern and Damon Wayans, written by Judd Apatow. Came out the same year as Eddie, 1996, and it's basically a buddy movie where Mike and Jimmy, two guys from Boston, end up kidnapping the star player of the Utah Jazz, played by Damon Wayans, in the middle of the NBA Finals. So, not a very plausible plot line, but just an incredible, incredible comedy by some real comedy legends. Believe it or not, this is actually our second-ranked movie based on our Rotten Tomatoes score at 31%. So, not great. The public does not love basketball films, Adam.
No, they don't. Unless it's a feel-good Disney hit like Coach Carter, then they really don't want to be seeing any basketball movies.
No, they don't. I'm hoping when I look at like White Men Can't Jump and He Got Game that the grades are a little bit higher. But so far we did do Coach Carter, and believe it or not, only a 65%.
For real?
Yeah.
That's like my number one go-to basketball movie if I just want to chill out.
Coach Carter is incredible. Coach Carter is incredible, but yeah, look, it's tough out there. You got to be like a real basketball person to, I guess, really enjoy these movies. So going forward, we're gonna have to up all the Rotten Tomato rankings ourselves by just going on and rating them ourselves, kind of cheating the system. So let's go. Let's just start it out. The movie opens up with Mike. He's a gym teacher, and we see how important the game is to him because he has a little interaction with like a 9-year-old kid where the kid's like, oh, as long as the Celtics win as long as the Celtics have fun, everything will be okay. And he like kind of berates the kid saying, no, it's the finals. The Celtics need to win. And then we see the same with his buddy Jimmy, who is a plumber, who's watching the game in this big mansion. You get the impression that like it's his mansion, and then you realize he's actually on a job right now, and he's watching the game on the job, and he gets scolded for it. But it gives us a glimpse, I think, into the point of the film of how important basketball or sports in general is to Boston. I mean, take yourself, for example. We have somebody, you're a big Celtics fan, right?
Yes, sir.
And you live in the UK. So how did you become a Celtics fan?
That's it's quite easy and quite long-winded to explain. I'll do the best to keep it as short and concise as possible. I'm quite old. I'm in my early 30s, so I'm not that old, but I'm borderline not young anymore.
Yeah. I'm about to hit my mid-30s, so we're good. We're young. We're young.
We're young. Okay, we'll go with youngish. Back in the day, there was no internet. Obviously, when we were kids, it was you play outside, and if you want to watch sports, you watch what's on TV.
Yep.
Before cable was really a thing here, and you had like 4 or 5 channels, they used to show one basketball game a week. So it would either be a Lakers, a Celtics, a Bulls, an MJ Bulls, or a Knicks game. And they were the 4 teams that you were going to see, whoever they chose to play.
Right.
Over the course of like 2 years, I kind of found myself wanting to see the Celtics play because at that point in time, they were the worst team out of all of them. So you had more to root for. You were like, when they won, it meant more than if you watched MJ dominate or you watched Pat Ewing kill someone. And then that just kind of spiraled, and then the internet came, and I found myself gravitating more to the Celtics, and then it just kind of spiraled like that, and now like my entire wardrobe's Boston. And
I love that, man. And you know what's crazy? So I was in the UK when London had the Olympics, around that time, and I believe Luol Deng was playing on the team. And I was going around into some stores, and I was thinking, like, I know that basketball's not very big over there, especially at that point. But I was thinking, like, well, the Olympics, England is like part of the competition, so like maybe there's gonna be some big Luol Deng like advertisements, and there really wasn't. It's just like it's all football, or that's soccer for all the Americans.
It drives me insane. It drives me absolutely insane because what got me into writing and podcasting and social media in the first place was I have no one to talk to about this stuff. You watch the game, and then it's like the people you do talk to, even if they're fans, they're more casual than they are like invested.
Yeah.
So I'd be like, look at the stats, and they were like, no, I just want to watch the highlights of the dunks. And I'm like, and then like Luol Deng is the biggest name basketball player to come out of this country probably ever.
Right.
I played against him in the junior leagues years ago, and
wow.
he was phenomenal back then. But people in England will still tell you more about Nick Nurse, who's like a coaching legend here.
Oh, wow.
Before they tell you about Luol Deng. Nobody knows Luol Deng. Everybody who follows basketball will tell you about Nick Nurse.
Huh. That's interesting.
It's more glorified, right? Because he's won the champ. Yeah.
All right. Yeah. I mean, I'm a big Bulls fan, so Luol Deng has like a very special place in my heart, as does Ben Gordon, who, I was hoping that Ben and Luol were going to end up on that England Olympic team, because I thought they could have made some noise, but things happen. I hope that with the growth of the game that it makes its way over there.
It's getting there slowly. There's more and more fan accounts popping up, more and more people talking about it.
All right, so we broke down Mike and Jimmy, and now let's get our first glimpse of Lewis Scott, who is the star player of the Utah Jazz. And the first glimpse we get of him is in a commercial where it's supposed to kind of parody the Charles Barkley "I'm Not a Role Model" commercial, and it's all about how I'm not a hero. And it sets up how he's this like selfish ball hog player before we actually get to see him on the court. And that around that time where you have MJ, we're kind of like in the middle of the MJ hysteria, or I guess when it was filmed, he probably was just coming back. But that's kind of when basketball started shifting to this like ISO shooting guard driven league, and you saw like the Tracy McGrady's and the Vince Carters. So this movie was very early in the like, you're a shooting guard who's a ball hog, because Jordan was winning, so he didn't really suffer from that. But then when we get the Kobe and the T-Macs and the Vinces, you start seeing, and the Allen Iversons, you start seeing that kind of negativity that comes with it. And then we get the first glimpse of him playing. And he has a little bit of a rough first half, but then he turns it on in the second half when the Celtics were going to win the title, and he comes back and just wills his team to a win, gets hot really quick. So I wrote a scouting report for him, because what I want to do is I want to figure out who is his like current NBA doppelganger. Okay, so here's our scouting report for Lewis Scott, and I looked up Damon Wayans' height. He's 6'2". Okay, so we got him. He's 6'2".
It's like Kyrie's height.
Yeah, well, Kyrie. Yeah, probably. He's an above the rim player. He's getting in, he's dunking. So athletic. He's an athletic 6'2". Good mid-range shooter. Shooting a lot of mid-range, but this is the mid-90s, so we kind of got to realize that's kind of the go-to. He got hot quick. He played a little pick and roll. Some good pick and roll shots. Teammates don't like him. Bit of a hothead. Almost starts a fight right before halftime. And he's a little bit selfish. Just keep feeding me the rock at the end of a huddle. So, the selfish part is hard, but just from an athletic player standpoint, I don't know. I got a little bit Donovan Mitchell vibes, another Jazz player.
I can see that, actually. Yeah, I can see that. He's made out to be more skilled than where Donovan Mitchell is at this point in his career, but
yeah,
definitely that above the rim and mid-range kind of sharpshooter coming off the pick. I can see that. That makes sense.
Yeah, a little bit of an ISO. Scorer first, short guard. I don't know, maybe a little Donovan Mitchell. Donovan Mitchell seems like maybe he's probably a better leader, but I don't know. He's getting into it with he's got a thing with Rudy Gobert, so I don't know. Maybe the locker room stuff is kind of warranted.
Yeah, I mean, he's definitely ruffling some feathers over in Utah. I've seen a few people now saying that this is going to be his last year there.
Yeah.
Whether or not that comes to fruition.
Oh man, that's I've seen that around too, and I believe is he off his rookie deal yet?
Did he?
Or
Isn't
did
it
he
this
sign an
year?
extension? It
Is
might
it
be this year. Did he sign an extension? Maybe I don't know.
I think he did ink it. I'm not too sure. I have to check that. But I know that when I've spoke to jazz covers and people around like who are around the Jazz a lot, they're all saying that if the Jazz want to win now, then you move Donovan and keep Gobert because Gobert's the more win now piece.
Sure.
So
Well,
that makes sense.
yeah, it makes sense. Well, let's see. Well, he came in right after Gordon Hayward. So Gordon Hayward's in what year?
Yeah, three.
Yeah, three.
He is the player option next year. Yeah.
Yeah. So Donovan Mitchell's on his rookie deal. That's hard to get rid of an all-star guard on his rookie deal. That's a tough sell to the fan base, I think. And he's a little bit more marketable than than Rudy Gobert is because he's a guard.
For sure.
If Shaq couldn't sell shoes, then
Yeah.
Gobert's marketability is
It's
not
true. It's true, and that's the problem. But Gobert's going to be the harder guy to move generally around the league because he just doesn't do much other than protect the rim, which has its value.
Yeah.
But it's also with the contract that he's on, it's also far less valuable than in terms of assets back than if you move Mitchell.
Yeah, for sure. Back to the film. In the film, okay, Lewis Scott is wearing the Jordan 11s. So the movie comes out in 96. So the shoes come out in 95, 96. So we're assuming that this is the year, right?
Yep.
So we're living in a world where Michael Jordan is a real person. And yet
I watched that movie again this afternoon, and I never noticed the shoes.
he's wearing the Jordan 11s, the Concord Jordan 11s. We're living in that alternate universe where Jordan doesn't make the finals in 95, 96 when the Bulls went 72-10. So what happened?
They don't even refer to him when they're talking about, because they start discussing the best players in the league just after that game, and they don't even refer to Jordan in the top 5.
No.
So this is a very alternate universe.
It's a very alternate, did he get injured? Was he really good at baseball in this alternate universe and he stuck with it? Was there no lockout in baseball and he just, these are the questions that I think about when I watch this film and I notice the little details.
If we want to do the tie-ins, he could definitely still be in Looney Tune Land and has decided to reside there.
Yeah, he really...
Because that's around about the same time too, right? It's only like a year later.
Yeah, because Jordan's, one of the Jordan 11s were the Space Jam 11. So maybe he did. He got stuck in Looney Tune Land. I think I would stay in Looney Tune Land.
I'm not coming back from Looney Tune Land.
You could do all these weird cartoon things, run through walls.
You're a giant.
Be a giant. Yeah, you could stretch your arm out from half court. I don't think I would leave. Do we think that, let's say that Jordan took an extra year off and that's why he's not hypothetically in this film. He comes back and the Bulls do make the finals in 97. Do we think that Lewis Scott is enough to pair it up with Karl Malone and John Stockton to get them over the hump and beat the Bulls?
Lewis Scott at the beginning of the movie, I think, and I don't want to go too far into that because we're at the beginning of the podcast. I feel like Lewis Scott at the beginning of the movie is enough to shoot them out of the game against Jordan and the Bulls.
For sure. He almost has that J.R. Smith, young J.R. Smith to him in the beginning of the film. Obviously he's a little more decorated than J.R. Smith based on all of the commercials that he's doing and all the endorsements he has. They have the scene after the kidnapping, which we'll get to, where, they're going through all the channels and he's like, I'll let you go if you don't show up in any of the commercials. And then he ends up playing one-on-one with an Oscar Mayer wiener. Hot dogs, so... But yeah, so So the Jazz win that first. They win that game. The first glimpse that we see of them, which means we're going to Game 7. And I mean, Boston is such a good sports city. Game 7, Boston. The atmosphere has to be insane. I went to a regular season Celtics Bulls game when it was the KG era Celtics. It was like the D Rose and the KG Paul Pierce Ray Allen Celtics. And I have never been so hyped up to be at a game, because before the game starts, they would play this, like, you know, on the Jumbotron, this one shot of Kevin Garnett just, like, literally screaming at you. And he's, like, the most intense dude ever. So, literally, like, I was feeling the adrenaline in this Boston arena before this basketball game. So a Game 7 in the finals in Boston, you know how serious Celtics fans are.
And this is based in the old Garden too. It's not
The
in
old
the
Garden.
It's the old Boston Garden where the floor, it was like
parquet
the floor
floor.
ends, the bench, and then literally the fans are right there. And that plays a huge part in the movie too, is how close the fans actually are to the players in that arena.
Yeah, because before the game starts, you see Mike and Jimmy go to their, like, seats that they always have, and Mike is literally, like, berating all of the Jazz players and the coach with his trash talk.
And he gets reactions because he's so close that it's so clear they can. You do that these days, then 9 times out of 10 they either don't hear you, or they can just ignore you. But because of how close they are in the movie, it portrays the old Garden quite well in that sense. But to me, that's one of the best scenes in the early parts of the movies, when they start to get the reactions off the players and the coaches.
It's so good. I mean, the trash talk is like, Jazz music sucks, and so do you. The best one, and when we get later in the podcast to the remake section of how we would remake the film, who we would cast, there's one line where he says, "Hey, Scott, I hear Manute Bol is banging your mom." Which is incredible.
That's a big dude.
That's a big dude. But in a remake, if they remade this, they could use Bol Bol.
Yeah.
So that goes right into it. I love that. That killed me. That whole section, it's one-liner after one-liner. And it's, you know, early Judd Apatow as the screenwriter. And, you know, Judd Apatow did Knocked Up and 40-Year-Old Virgin, Superbad, all of those films. And we kind of think of him as, like, you know, those movies are a little bit more raunchy, and, like, early Judd Apatow, he was still making hilarious films. And when I, you know, saw that he was the one who wrote this, I was like, wow, that makes so much sense, because of the one-liners, like, just going down. And then Daniel Stern, I mean, just perfect in that role.
Nike called "You're not good enough. They want their shoes back" was the final line in that scene.
So good. So when Lewis finally gets kidnapped, he doesn't show up to practice. And we again get a glimpse of, like, his selfish nature, because Coach Kimball, who is played by Chris McDonald, who probably has one of, like, the 3 most iconic sport villain characters as Shooter McGavin in Happy Gilmore. He plays the Utah Jazz coach, and he's freaking out that his star player is not at the practice before the Game 7 of the NBA Finals. And again, we get another one-liner where he says Grant Hill would have showed up early after he went to church, but I have to coach Lewis Scott. And
it's crazy. It's a bit before its time, but it kind of leads into the Allen Iverson practice debate as well.
Yeah, it does, right?
Yeah, that was where my mind went with this. Like, is he a little bit like Iverson? Like, Iverson would have really had a field day with that, because especially if that was a few years later when Iverson was in the league and the whole practice debate was going on, that scene in the movie would have fit so perfectly with that whole scenario at the time.
Yeah, you know what? Iverson's probably a pretty good comp for Lewis Scott. He really is, because even, like, Iverson is a notorious, like, all-time partier. And Lewis Scott is partying hard after Game 6. Like, if I drank the amount of alcohol that they drank in that bar scene, I would literally be a dead person. Like
It's
there's
that
no
last fishbowl, right? That last big green fishbowl.
it's like that if I didn't drink any of the other alcohol and just drank the big fishbowl, I would still have probably been passed out for like 48 hours and had to get my stomach pumped.
And that was a huge cameo there too, right? From Larry Bird.
From the legend. Yeah, that Larry Bird has there's a lot of pretty good cameos in this, but Larry Bird's got good cameos in basketball movies cuz back, earlier when we were talking Space Jam, he's phenomenal in Space Jam. And he had a really great one too. Like they're at the bar, they have to pretend to be Jazz fans cuz they're trying to, hang out with Lewis Scott, and the legend, the all-time greatest Celtic shows up and they're like nervous, freaking out, and they got to pretend that they don't like the Celtics. And Larry Bird, says like you're a bandwagon or whatever, and then they're trying to like comfort themselves after what just happened, and they're like, I guess he was overrated. And Lewis Scott goes, nah, he sucked.
The legend. I like that little exchange between them as well, because it made it really believable how they were so like, because that these guys are hardcore Celtics fans from the way the movie begins to the way it shows you their entrance into the garden before the game.
Mm-hmm.
And then obviously they don't go into the bar with the idea of kidnapping him. They just want to get him wasted.
Yeah.
Get him so wasted that he can't perform for the next few days. And then you see that interaction with Larry, and it just goes crazy from there, man. And it's a really fun movie to get up to that point. Once the storyline's being set in stone,
yeah,
and then the pivot, it's a really interesting. What's the right word? Storyline. There we go.
Yeah, and I think like what's another aspect that makes it great is they have such great chemistry as like believable friends. Like you believe that they had like years and years of history, in a friendship together. Which they mentioned, they've been friends since like high school or whatever, and that's important. And those two guys in particular have like a lot of great buddy movies. Dan Akroyd, Ghostbusters, Blues Brothers. Daniel Stern was one of the sticky and wet bandits in Home Alone. So they just nail that whole aspect of friendship, and that really makes the movie, because if they didn't have good chemistry, you wouldn't believe any of the things could possibly happen.
Huge Dumb and Dumber feel to it in terms of the buddying and the way they bounce off each other. It's very much in a Dumb and Dumber style of friendship.
Yeah, it really is. What's your favorite buddy movie that either of those two guys have been a part of?
Home Alone 1 and 2, completely.
Yeah.
I argue with the wife at least once every 2 months, because she says you can only watch it at Christmas, and I say it should be an all year round film.
You can watch Home Alone at any point. I'm with you.
This is my argument. Yeah, exactly. My daughter and her completely disagree, so I'll get to watch it for a few weeks a year, unfortunately.
Look, it is one of the all-time great Christmas movies. There's no debating that. But you can watch Christmas movies outside of Christmas time.
Exactly. Same as you can watch Halloween movies outside of Halloween time.
Yeah.
But apparently not. Apparently seasonal movies are for seasonal times.
I understand that it may make them feel a little bit more special when you watch them, but I can't get behind that reasoning. I feel like if I like something and it shows up, like I'm gonna watch it if it pops up on TV, or if Netflix just happens to like, oh, this is on now, I'm gonna watch it.
Yeah, me too. I'm exactly the same.
So they kidnap him. They go through the film. You see like Mike has been divorced, or he's in the process of it. His wife left him, so he's got to kind of be on his best behavior. Jimmy, not much luck with the ladies. He lives by himself amongst like just Boston sport memorabilia gold. Like I don't know how he has access to everything that he has, because he's a plumber. And
it makes you wonder, right? I mean, maybe it was he's just been at all those events when they've happened, or Maybe he's a thief. It's really weird how, like as you say, some of this memorabilia is like hundreds of thousands of dollars.
Yeah, it's
But
not.
that's now, I guess. Back then, it was really recent, so it was probably like $15.
Yeah, maybe I guess we'd have to go with that. That might be one of the things that you're like, how does this dude have like the Masters jacket to lend to his friends and like an Olympic gun? Like that's the gun that they use for the kidnapping. It's like a gun that was used by an Olympian in a shootout, and he just has this stuff available. He's got bird jerseys framed, just every kind of like Boston Bruins stuff everywhere, like Gordie House skate he had. I mean, things that are, like you said, just outrageous amounts of money, and he just happens to just have them in his. I guess he doesn't have a family.
Yeah, I mean, for me, I'm just like, well, do plumbers make a load of cash out in the
They,
States? Like,
yes, they make good money, but not like that kind of good money. And but he doesn't have a family to spend money on, so I guess he just buys what makes him happy. So more power to him.
along with the season ticket at the Garden, though, which is going to run him
Oh god,
ridiculous money.
the season tickets too. Yeah, I that's something that I was like, maybe they've had them for such a long time, and in the '90s, season tickets definitely were like not nearly as outrageous as they are now, which also doesn't really make sense because the secondary market makes it that you can just pick and choose whatever games you want to go to. But back then, maybe I can kind of believe it if they were like grandfathered in or, their families had it. But those seats are pretty good. They're right behind the bench, like 5 rows behind the bench.
Yeah, I'd pay if I didn't have a family, and I'm paying whatever I need to pay to sit there.
So when Lewis finally does escape, he encounters a few different Boston or Bostonians. He encounters the cab driver, and he's like, "We need to like move it. Like, let's go, let's go." And the cab driver like puts the window up, and there's a Celtics sticker, and then he runs into their friend Kevin, who's a police officer, and he just kind of like lets them continue to kidnap him. Horrible job by him. He wants to make a little bit of money. He uses that as an opportunity to create some Celtics championship T-shirts to sell. But that again kind of drives home just like that Celtic pride, like how intense Boston sports fans are. So they recapture him, and it leads to they're driving in the plumbing truck, and he's like, "Please don't take this away from me. I've worked so hard for it." And they get into like the conversation, which like is still relevant today. That if you just read the Twitter comments, it's like just people blasting athletes as like pampered and like spoiled, and how they don't have to work hard, without realizing how difficult it is to get to that level and how much they have to sacrifice. And I thought it's kind of weird how even back then, it's been 1996, so we're almost 25 years, and we still get that, from fans.
Everyone looks at the money, right? They just see, oh, well, you earn millions and millions of dollars, your life's made, and it's like, well, as you say, the work to get there is one thing, but then the
Yeah.
work to maintain, and then you maintain and you improve, you maintain. These guys don't have normal lives, regardless of the money.
No.
Their bodies are shot. When you see most, like anyone over 6'8" that has played more than 10 years in the league, they look 15 years older than what they actually are. LeBron looks old at the moment. When he had that gray in his beard, he looked old.
He did look old.
Dude's our age.
Yeah.
Look, it puts miles on your body. You're paid and compensated because of the miles that's going onto your body.
Yeah, you're literally like, a lot of these guys aren't going to walk the same way. And especially, and that's just like basketball. It's not like only basketball fans feel this way. People, say the same thing about football players who, the average football player, I think their career is like 2 or 3 years. They, unless you're like a star quarterback, you're not making, like generational money for the most part. A lot of these guys that are fringe professional players, like they're not driving off in Bentleys. They're, they're only going to be good for a couple of years, and then they got to figure out the rest of their lives. So, yeah, it was kind of a weird commentary on how people feel about athletes, and especially because like the fans are like watching them, so you'd figure like they're like hate watching it almost like I don't know, they're entertainers and or whatnot, but like let's show some appreciation. These guys work hard.
And you see that on Twitter now, don't you? You see people that will watch a game just to tear guys down and rip guys apart. And I try my hardest not to get involved in any of that stuff because it's very counterintuitive. But it's also like, I don't want to throw hate. I don't want to put that negativity out into the universe.
Yeah.
Moving on to the movie, though, it does lead to a nice little white men can't jump style one-on-one.
Yeah, it does. It does. And I think it also is like a good kind of point to prove that, like, hey, kid who played high school basketball, like, NBA players will kill you one-on-one. Like you have no shot. Like, the worst NBA player will kill you one-on-one. And that's exactly what we see. Like, Lewis Scott demolishes Daniel Stern's character to the point that he literally can't get up off the ground after he's just beaten. Like, Daniel Stern hits the first shot, and then I don't know. It's probably 11-1.
Yeah. And if you remember at the end of that, he kind of limps off. Like, he's also
like when he's like crawling back to his wife, he's like, the only reason she like even lets him in is because he's like,
so physically and mentally destroyed.
Back to Lewis Scott. He makes Mike and Jimmy wear Lewis Scott jerseys to Game 7 of the finals, and he puts them in a predicament where they have to root for him to win so they don't go to prison. That's kind of the deal. But then, because their friend Kevin, the cop, saw them kidnap him and didn't turn them in and went and made t-shirts, they kind of also have to root for the Celtics to win, one, for their own fandom, but two, because if not, he's going to make them pay for the t-shirts. So they're in this pickle of, like, what do I root for? What do you root for in that situation?
I root for my freedom. I can find out if I've got all that memorabilia. I can definitely find that big check that the cop's asking for. It might take me a few days at auction, but I can definitely pull that money together.
Yeah, I mean, it's like, is there any part of you, like, obviously you're rooting not to go to prison, right, for kidnapping, but is there any part of you being at a Game 7 that you're like, and you're basically sitting courtside, that if the team's doing well, that you're just like, there's part of you that wants to root for them because that's a part of you?
Yeah, I feel like that's gonna be that's the whole point of the movie. But if it was me personally, I'd be so torn. I don't know how I'd handle it because I'd cheer for every bucket on every end of the floor and every block on every side. You just have no voice left after one quarter.
Yeah, and then and then the thing is, like, they do figure out how to get the money because Jimmy gets selected to shoot the half court shot. And he hits the shot. And I have to say, I was at a Nets G League game this year. And G League games are a lot of fun because not too many people go to them. So you can have a really, like, intimate basketball experience for very cheap. And because not a lot of people go to them, I was selected to shoot the half court shot the night that one of the games I went to. And it's kind of rigged. They give you a street ball. And
really?
And I was like, wait a second. It's like a branded street ball that has you have to swish it. If you don't swish it, it's going to fly off. It's going to fly off the rim. You know, it doesn't have that soft, like, give. You either have to go straight off the backboard or you have to swish it. And those are the only two options. So I just, I needed to get that off my chest because I've been holding on to my Long Island Nets halftime shootout hate for the better part of like 6 or 7 months.
What was the prize if you hit
it? So the prize was courtside seats to a G League game. Now, mind you, I was sitting literally in the first row behind the Nets bench when I was
So you
selected.
basically got free tickets to where you were already sitting.
Correct.
I mean, free's free.
Freeze
So
free. Look, I would have went. I would have went, and I didn't hit the shot. I think that I was a little to the left. I was a little to the left, but I would have. I think I would have hit it if it went straight on and not like to the left. I had the distance, and I think I had the touch on it. I think I would have swished it. I just missed the rim completely.
oh, that's I'm blaming the ball.
I'm blaming the ball too. If it was
I'm blaming the ball.
look, and especially at the time, it was basketball season when I was coaching, and like you mess around after practice, so like that's a shot that I've taken plenty of times at that point, and with a good ball. So that's what I was used to. In Game 7, we get some other good cameos. We got Marv Albert at his peak. We got Bill Walton.
Bill Walton plays a large part in that movie, actually.
Yeah.
In cameos here and there, yeah.
It's our second Marv Albert cameo so far in the podcast. He's leading the podcast in basketball cameos. So, I didn't plan on having the Marv Albert cameo category to the podcast, but we've arrived.
Organic growth, man. Organic growth.
He's leading that. At the halftime scene, they go to the bathroom and they're talking about like they're freaking out. Like if we don't win, we're gonna go to prison. Whatever, blah blah blah. And Jimmy goes like, Mike, like I'm gonna take the heat for you. Like you got a wife and kids. Like I'm gonna say that I did it. And Mike's a good friend. He's like, no, like we're in this together because who's gonna spot you in the yard? My question to you is, would you take the heat for your new co-host in the Hoop Spy podcast, John Macri, if you kidnapped a player together?
Are we going to English jail or American jail?
Ooh, your choice.
English jail, yeah, that's fine. American jail, not a chance.
That's a good move. American jail is needs some work.
Yeah, English jail's too soft.
Oh yeah?
Yeah, you can have like an Xbox or a PlayStation and all that stuff.
That's pretty good.
Yeah, so you can be okay.
So I get an Xbox or a PlayStation and some free meals?
Yeah, and a free gym.
Free gym. You guys got to figure it out over there, man. I'll tell you what.
Yeah,
So I went. When I go over to England, I'd spend in the UK in general. I'd spend like 3 weeks or so because at the time I was working for a band.
Okay.
So one of the nights, the singer was like going. It was a punk band, so it's like real high energy, crazy, and he like scraped his knee real bad on the stage and needed to get stitches. So we like went to the hospital. And he just got stitches.
Yeah, that's normal. Like,
and they were like, yeah, you can. That's it. You can go now. And we're like, what do you mean? Like, how do we do? Do we pay? Like, what do we do? And they're like, no, you're good. It was crazy. Whereas like here, it would be like this whole ridiculous thing. So you guys got some stuff figured out there. You got some stuff figured
literally out. Just that. It is literally just that.
I do have to say, speaking as highly as I can, if I have a nitpick, the food was tough.
The food, the people, the weather,
the weather wasn't horrible when we went, or the first time we went. It didn't rain that often, but the first time, but it I know that's a thing that does happen.
Yeah, and the food, man, the food's good food's hard to find, really hard to find.
Yeah, I ate a lot of McDonald's. Good chicken over there. Good chicken, like from like fast food places.
Yeah.
In comparison to here, where everything's like pumped with
beef,
with antibiotics and all this stuff. But I do have to say too, the McDonald's over there had a Kit Kat McFlurry, which we don't have in the States. We have McFlurries, but we don't have the Kit Kat option, and the Kit Kat option is a game changer.
I tell you, when I'm ever in the States, like I'm huge, like I'm done with England as soon as I can get out, the better. I'm very vocal about this too. I don't hide it. But there was certain food like so McDonald's in America is way better, but the one thing that you guys have that we don't is your burger is by default medium rare, or that's at least my experience on the West Coast. So if I order a burger from anywhere, they're generally medium rare.
Uh-huh.
That doesn't exist here. So when you order a burger here, it's well done, and that's it, because that's the food standard. Like, you can't have pink burgers. So that really threw me off when I first went to the States, and I'm like, can I have a burger? And it's still pink. I'm like, no, I'm not eating this. Like, I'd eat a steak like this, but I'm not eating a burger like this. You need to go and sort that out for me.
So where are you at? Did you eat it or did you bring it back? Because medium rare burger is the way to go.
Yeah, no, I took it back. Like, I weren't sure. I was like, this isn't what I'm used to. Like, I returned this at home, so I feel like I have to return this here.
Yeah, when you come back, medium rare is the way to all the meats, medium rare.
Yeah, I mean, steak, I'm fine. Medium rare, I'll eat medium rare steak.
Burgers too. It melts in your mouth. It's like I don't want to eat a hockey puck.
Yeah, you see, that's the only way they're served here. That's
No,
probably
it'll change your life.
But then I come home and I can't have them no more. So then, and that happened to me with Dunkin' Donuts coffee, and it's destroyed me ever since.
You know what? Dunkin's their coffee, their like hot coffee's good. Their iced coffee is there's so much sugar in it. I can't do it. I can't do it.
I don't really drink iced coffee because we don't get the weather for it too much.
True.
It's just hot coffee all the time. And it was just the flavors. Like, we have Starbucks, but I said I was actually having this exact conversation earlier today. I think it's because it's not readily available that I need it so badly. That I'm just like, I need this. And so yeah, if I'm kind of worried that I'll get into these medium rare burgers and then not be able to acquire them.
I feel you. That's kind of how I am with Oreos. I have like I love Oreos, my favorite food in the world, or like snack food. And if I have a thing of Oreos around me, I will eat the whole thing. So I don't eat Oreos.
Because then you're gonna be like, oh, well, I want more Oreos.
Yeah, I want more. I always want more Oreos, so I just don't eat them, so I can I don't harm myself. Yeah, look, there's other things that I indulge in that I shouldn't be, that, make up for it, like ice cream and other delicious, like donuts. But Oreos, I'll eat the whole thing.
Your guys' donuts are amazing.
Yeah.
Funny story, that's one, before you carry on with the movie.
Yeah.
I know the funniest thing I learned when I went to America, when I went to the last time I was at the States, because it was the time I was old enough to kind of do whatever I wanted to do.
Okay.
7-Eleven does not open from 7 till 11. That shit's 24 hours.
Oh, 24 hours.
I did not know this. I sped in the dark with no satellite navigation on my car, got lost in the middle of LA, ended up in Crenshaw, just because I was trying to hit the 7-Eleven by 11 p.m. And then when I was driving back and I finally figured out where I am, the 7-Eleven's still open and it's 3 hours later. So I'm like, I nearly died and the place is still open.
Yeah, Crenshaw's not a place that you want to get lost in, especially for a 7-Eleven.
I was in Pasadena and I just hit the freeway because I took a wrong turn, and I was waiting for my navigation system to tell me where to go, but the battery had died and I hadn't plugged it in properly. No. So I've come off an exit, and then I'm like, where am I? So when you're looking for street signs, and it's like Crenshaw Boulevard, and in my head I'm just like, I don't want to be here.
What's crazy? Like, if you were lost, I'm from New York. I live on Long Island. On Long Island, there's literally a 7-Eleven like every 700 feet. Like, you literally can't drive anywhere without passing a 7-Eleven. They're literally, like, the town I grew up in, they're building a 7-Eleven across the street from like another 7-Eleven, pretty much. They're literally everywhere. So you would have been good. You wouldn't have had to rush anywhere in New York.
I was literally just going to buy a 40 because there was a movie I wanted to watch, and I was like, I want a 40. I'm in America, I want a 40. And the way it was I was meant to go straight, take a right, then a left, and then the 7-Eleven was there. And I took a left and then a right, and the next thing I knew, I was on the freeway, and I was like, I guess I'm going on the freeway. And it took me a 3-hour round trip to figure out how to get back to where I was staying at.
Yeah, California's tricky like that. Like on when you're on the freeway and you can easily end up in Inglewood or Watts or one of these places that you don't want to end up in with no navigation. So I'm sorry you
And an
experienced that.
English accent.
Yeah,
And an English accent.
I'm sorry you experienced that all for a 7-Eleven, but they do have
That was
good.
one of my favorite story of my trip.
It's a story. Like if you could still tell that story now, it's a good story and it's
Yeah,
worth
I
it. You
mean,
came
I
out on
wasn't scared. I never
no.
feared
There's
for my
nothing to be
life.
scared, and you came out unscathed. So But I'm gonna give you a scenario that you may not come out unscathed in. Game 7, Lewis doesn't show up to practice. Right, Coach Kimball says, "I'm gonna bench you." Right, I'm gonna bench my star player. I'm gonna bench him. What do you think? Like the internet would do, Twitter would do, the fans of Boston would do if like that happened with Jason Tatum in a game 7 where like Brad Stevens was like I'm benching him for like a minute.
Some either Twitter's going to melt down, or there's going to be some very, very nasty assassination attempts in the garden almost instantly. It would.
Like would the fans rush the floor? I don't know.
I mean, I think that depends on how the game goes, right? Like if you sit
Yeah.
taking and you lose terribly, then yeah, I think somebody's trying to get to the coach or they're trying to get to the locker room after.
Yeah. Brad Stevens might not be welcomed back. Jason Tatum seems like a great kid though. I don't think he's going to miss the game, but who knows? Maybe some two random dudes kidnap him and for whatever team the Celtics may or may not play one day in the finals.
Yeah, that's a very big possibility with how good he's becoming.
What do you think about the Celtics shot this year?
I think that it's not as straightforward and as clear as what a team like the Clippers is, but I feel like that when they're playing the way they played in the first half of the Portland game today,
Yeah.
then they've got just as much of a shot as any other team in the league. The second half, not so much.
Like in the first half, some of the shots I was watching Tatum hit, I thought I was watching replays because he just kept getting to that little elbow and just every time same spot, just get into a spot and knock it down. Not when he's playing like that. And then when you see, like fourth quarter Jalen,
And
that's
there hasn't been fourth quarter Jalen much before. To be saying that now is a huge development, and that's going to be what lifts them to contender status.
yeah. You worried about Kemba at all?
A little bit. I've been quite negative on Kemba through the season. I never thought he was the guy that the Celtics needed. I felt like they needed to go for more of a playmaking guard.
Mm-hmm.
I'm kind of a believer now. I feel like I've been converted into a Kemba guy, but he's shown so much in the last 2 games that if he can stay healthy, he's going to be a huge factor.
Yeah, Kemba's he's a cold-blooded dude. Like growing up, again in New York, and he's a New Yorker. Watching him in the Big East with UConn, like he hit one of the most iconic shots, in in the Garden. So he's a special dude. He's not going to be afraid of any of the moments, if the Celtics get there.
No, and he's clutch. Like he is clutch, and like the last 2 games, he's been the guy to kind of raise the team's activity levels when he feels like nobody's really scoring or the lid's on the bucket.
Yeah.
He's been the one to kind of lead that way, and that's kind of what's converted me throughout the season of how he doesn't lead by being vocal. He leads by doing. He's an example guy more than a vocal leader, and sometimes that's the best type of player to be around.
Yeah, I mean, either way, it's better leadership than what his predecessor had showed. So,
Yeah, because that was no leadership. Yeah, yeah.
so let's get back to the film. The climax of the film happens when, and the Celtics are winning, and Lewis Scott is being selfish, missing shots, and because again Mike is so close to the court, he looks Lewis in the eye and says, "Listen to me. You need to start passing the freaking ball. They're never going to see it coming. Pass the ball." And he does. He starts passing, and it flips the game around, right? He becomes this like completely different player who's the threat of his scoring ability opens up all of these options for his teammates. What current NBA player do you think would benefit the most if they figured that part of the game out?
Oh, that's tough. My mind is going straight to James Harden, but I feel like James Harden's kind of got that playmaking ability in his bag, and he does reach in there sometimes.
Yeah, I mean he's a much more advanced playmaker. Like when I saw that when I was watching that part of the movie again because I'm a Bulls fan, I immediately went like, man, that would be nice if Zach LaVine figured this out.
Yeah, I see what you're saying with Levine. I'm
Because
trying to think who else there is that could really do with that. There's so many, and it's really hard to think of who would be definitive.
I feel like if Bradley Beal figured it out, he's another guy who could get to a different level. Like guys who are just such good scorers, but you know, if they figured out how to make their teammates better, it would really help them. And like he's like Harden does have that part to his game, which is why
I
he's
feel
able.
like Beal probably does as well. He just doesn't have the teammates around him that he can trust. Like if when Wall's back and it's Beal, Wall, and Bertans, I feel like you'll see more facilitating out of Beal.
Yeah, and I mean Beal is definitely more advanced than say like Zach LaVine is. And
Kyrie would be great if he passed.
Kyrie is another one. Back to it. I'm here for the Kyrie slander because he is a Brooklyn Net now, and you know I don't like either of the New York basketball teams. So
Melo would have been another guy.
Melo is a good one. If Melo figured that out, I mean, but if Melo figures that out, he's basically like LeBron.
Yeah, Melo is one of my all-time favorite guys to watch play, though.
Me too. I love Melo. I'm a Melo truther. I think historically he gets underrated, and he's a guy that I think in his prime could have been on like the best player on a championship team. I think you know, and especially what he did for the Knicks, like living in New York, taking the responsibility of being like, I want to be the guy who changes Knicks basketball. And like, yeah, he didn't have the ideal ending or even complete tenure, but the Knicks' best seasons over the last 20 something years were with Carmelo Anthony.
Yeah.
So,
And
you know,
he was synonymous. Like whenever I mean, I was quite fortunate, shameless plugs, with Jonathan actually to
yep.
speak to George Carl,
Hmm.
who coached Melo when he was in his earlier times. But to me, whenever I think of Carmelo Anthony, in my mind, I always see him in a Knicks jersey. I always see him in Knicks uniform with the orange headband.
Yep.
And I used to love Trent. That was like if the Celtics weren't playing and League Pass was out at this point, I wanted to see Melo play. Like he's always been one of those guys who's quick release and just his shooting form's perfect, and he always hits his spots. But
So
again, if he
smooth.
learned to pass,
He would have,
if he
yeah,
learned, yeah,
he would have been he would have been an all timer, like potentially like top 15 all time guy if he figured out the playmaking part to his game. That's a
oh
good
for
call.
sure.
That's a good call. That's a good call. The one last like little nugget about like the actual game that I want to throw in there, which towards the end of the game, right? Because spoiler alert, the Jazz win once Lewis figures out the playmaking. They give a nice little ode to the Larry Bird steal versus the Pistons when Lewis Scott steals the ball with like 7 seconds left. I thought that was a nice little touch, a little historical Celtics thing to throw
Yeah,
in.
in the last, and it's a playing it in the garden, and Bird's been there, and like in the movie, I mean, not been there in the garden. We all know
Yeah.
Bird was there, but he's been in the movie, and it's based around. It does feel like a lot of it is based around Celtics history. At the beginning of the movie as well, you see where Lewis Scott walks into the garden and he looks up, and it pans over all the banners, and
Yep.
you kind of get the feeling that he's using that as motivation to win. So it definitely kind of bases a lot of the narrative around of the Boston sports heritage and the history. So to end it on that type of ode, that type of homage to that steel, and I felt like that kind of full circled the movie really well and kind of tied the narrative together quite nicely.
100%. And I think that's what makes the movie such a good basketball movie, that it's very authentic in its Boston fandom. You know, they hit all of those little marks that you want as like a fan of the game. Um, because if, you know, they didn't have those little ticks, the movie would have just felt like they picked some random teams. And for a movie that you call Celtic Pride, you really need to hit the authentic marks, especially like you said, a team that has so much history.
And then they did it well. That's the thing. They really tied in from the Ravage fan base to the way the fans in like kind of turn on the two main characters when they're in jazz uniforms to then they get behind them because they're like, oh, it's superstition.
Yeah.
And all these different little like nooks and crannies of the narrative that really made the film kind of sing is what makes that film so good, because there's parts of it that aren't that funny, where you feel like, oh, maybe it's trying too hard here. But it flows so well because you can kind of imagine yourself being in the 90s and being in the same stadium and being like, seeing these two doofuses in jazz gear and it does tie in really well. And if you was ever going to kidnap a player, the mid-90s is when you could get away with it.
That's 100% true. Mid-90s were a
storm.
It's a weird time, but a time that I cherish so much, as it was like you, since we're probably around the same age, my formative years. Let's before we wrap it up, let's try to remake the film in 2020 or recast it, because I think it could. I miss basketball movies. You know, I feel like they don't make a lot of good ones nowadays. So I always want to, you know, part of this podcast is trying to figure out like if we could remake this movie now and who would be in it.
I feel like you'd have to do. I'm terrible with these people's names, but with actors' names. I'm a face guy. So the Home Alone dude for me would have to be Will Ferrell.
Okay, that's a good one.
And Dan Akroyd would have to be Mark Wahlberg.
Another good one, and also an authentically
Boston
guy. That's and they've worked together, so they have good chemistry.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
that's good.
That'd be who I think would make it. And then as Lewis Scott, you'd probably want it to be. I mean, you could just use him again because he's still so funny.
Well, you could use his son. His son is like a, you know, he was on like a pretty big show over here, New Girl, and he's a funny dude. And his son is like it looks just like him.
You just throw him in there and that'd work perfect.
I like that. My version was, since it was a Judd Apatow film, if you got him involved again, you can do like the Superbad reunion and do Seth Rogen and Bill Hader as the two guys. And then for Lewis Scott, I was like, and I don't know why I didn't think of Damon Wayans Jr. when I was doing this exercise with myself, because it seems like a very obvious answer, but I was thinking like Michael B. Jordan.
That'd work really well.
Because he hasn't done, I mean, he's done Creed, but I feel like he could pull off a basketball movie.
Oh, for sure. I have another basketball movie in mind for him, though, which we'll get to in a moment.
Okay. Have
you ever watched Joanna Man?
Yes.
I feel like Michael B. Jordan would be perfect in Joanna Man because it would show you a different side to his acting skills.
Yeah, Joanna Man was good. I don't know if that's a tough remake in 2020 with the.
You're not getting away with it. Yeah,
no, you're not. You'll get it. You can get away with Celtic Pride, but I don't know if you're getting away with Joanna.
But that's one of the most underrated basketball movies of all time.
It is. That's a good one. That's a good one. And again, like if you look at Rotten Tomatoes, I bet it's like 8% on Rotten Tomatoes.
Oh yeah, it'll be something terrible. But I watched that like 2 weeks ago with I was doing this, but you know when the hiatus of the NBA and lockdown really kicked in, we'd done a basketball movies podcast on the Celtics blog show where we didn't speak about them, we just ranked them. Mm-hmm. And no one had seen Joanna Man but me, so I was like, well, I'm gonna watch this again. But I feel like Michael B. Jordan could pull that off. For sure.
I want to say that Joanna Man is on one of the I thought it was on Netflix recently. I thought I like went through, maybe it was Hulu. I was like scrolling through and I was like, oh, I'm gonna watch that soon. But then I was like, I'm gonna save it for when I actually do the episode on Joanna Man. So you might have to do that episode because that's, like you said, one of the movies that not a lot of people have seen.
Yeah, man, I'm always free and I love that movie.
All right, what before we go, what do you got to plug?
You plugged me at the beginning, so you can catch me on Twitter at Adam Taylor NBA. It's the same on Instagram, but I'm never there. Find me at celticsblog.com in written format and audio format, and with Jonathan Macri, who was the first guest on this show at the Hoop Spot. That's a podcast.
Awesome. Adam, thank you so much for doing this. Had a blast. Celtic Pride is, like I said, like it's probably my top 3 favorite basketball films, so had to be one of the early ones that we did, and I hope that, you know, by doing this, some other people that haven't seen the movie will check it out, because
for sure.
this is a 90s classic basketball movie that really...
What are the other 2?
Huh?
What are the other 2?
My other 2 are He Got Game
Yeah.
and White Man Can't Jump.
So we've got the exact same other 2, but my third is Above the Rim.
We're doing I'm doing Above the Rim next week, so that's
awesome.
That's a pretty good segue.
There you go.
Into it. Adam, thanks again.
Thank you for having me, man.
Yeah, it was a good time. I can't wait to do Juwanna Mann with you. And
I look forward to it.
Make sure to check out all of Adam's work. It's awesome. Everybody enjoy the NBA season that we got, because they're doing a great job. Be safe, wear a mask, and we'll see you next time.